When MEE broke the story that the International Criminal Court was seeking the arrest of Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, it broke across the mainstream media and got the attention of the minister himself. Facing potential charges of forced displacement, persecution and apartheid, Smotrich responded petulantly, pledging to retaliate not against the court, but against the very Palestinians he's accused of violating. Smotrich exercises extraordinary power in Israel. As well as Minister of Finance, he has a portfolio in the Defense Ministry that gives him de facto control in the West Bank, where he has already ordered the eviction of a Bedouin village as part of his retaliation. Palestinian diplomats have been urging the ICC to act against him for years. MEE revealed the prosecutor's office secretly applied for his arrest warrant in April. The ICC has not publicly confirmed this, but under court regulations, warrant applications are classified until approved. The process typically takes several months, but if accepted, it would be the first ever warrant issued by an international court for the crime of apartheid. It would also make Smotrich the third Israeli official wanted by the court, along with Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. Smotrich has called the move a declaration of war. Today, we'll show you the man behind the minister. Who is Bezalel Smotrich, and how has his radical rise to power affected Palestinians and Israelis? First, Palestinians. I'm joined by Palestinian physician and politician Mustafa Barghouti. Mustafa, welcome back to MEE Live. Now, Smotrich has responded to the ICC by retaliating against Palestinians. So I have to ask, is this international community action actually helpful to the victims of his alleged war crimes?
Of course, it's very helpful, because finally somebody is holding this fascist and the government of Israel accountable. The problem we faced is that their crimes have been doubling and increasing every day because they don't feel any accountability to international law, and they don't feel that they will pay for the crimes they are committing. So this kind of decision, which of course aggravated huge anger among Smotrich and his supporters, is a very first step. But if you think that because of that decision they would do something bad, they are already doing so many bad things. Smotrich personally has been responsible for the unprecedented level of expansion of settlements. He has funded settlements. He was behind decisions in several by the government and several other laws to change the whole nature of the land and to allow expansion of settlements at a rate that is unprecedented. The man is absolutely fanatic, and he believes there is no place not only for a Palestinian state, but for Palestinians in general on the land of Palestine.
Indeed, his rationale for retaliating against Palestinians has been to call this application for an arrest warrant a declaration of war by the Palestinian Authority, who he says engaged with the ICC to provide evidence. Is that something you care to respond to?
Well, if we don't turn to international law and to international institutions, then whom should we turn to? They deny Palestinians the right to struggle in every possible way. They deny, although international law says that Palestinians have the right to struggle against occupation and apartheid and persecution and oppression on all possible methods. So Israel is against military, of course, resistance. They are against popular nonviolent resistance. They are against Palestinians trying to go to international courts and demand justice from international institutions and international law. They are against Palestinians even expressing their needs and expressing their views. So what you are talking about is an entity, a Zionist entity that wants to kill all kinds of Palestinian resistance so that it can fulfill its dreams. And their dream is not only land appropriation, but also the total ethnic cleansing of Palestinians.
Let's just break down what that looks like in practice, specifically under Smotrich and Smotrich's impact on Palestinian life up to now. The warrant application claims that he's committed forced displacement, persecution, apartheid. One thing that Smotrich repeatedly advocates for is what he calls the voluntary migration of Palestinians out of Gaza and the West Bank. This phrase does a lot of heavy lifting. What does it look like in reality?
First of all, he's using the word voluntary to cover up the crime. What does voluntary mean when his settler gangs, the gangs who are terrorists, who are described as terrorists even by some Israeli sources, when these guys come to Palestinian communities, especially Bedouin communities, uproot their trees, burn their houses, burn their cars, then force them, beat them so badly, and sometimes shoot them to death, as they have done to 12 people, and then force them by guns to leave their communities. And this is so well recorded. This is so well documented. 71 Palestinian communities so far under Smotrich have been evicted from their land by these settler gangs. And some of these communities were evicted more than once. The Israeli government, with Smotrich being a finance minister in it, have already evicted 40,000 Palestinian refugees who were originally evicted in 1948 from their land. They evicted them again from the refugee camps of Tul Karim, Jenin, and Nur Shams after destroying these three camps. And they forced them by force to be evicted. So what kind of voluntary ethnic cleansing is here? We are talking about genocide that was committed in Gaza, which ended up killing 12% of the population and injuring 12% of the population of Gaza, more than 250,000 people. Apply 12% to any country. Apply it to the United States, and you would be talking about 36 million Americans injured or killed in the course of 2 years. This is the level of crime that is committed against Palestinians. And not only that, Smotrich is strangulating Palestinians economically.
Yes, I was going to point out he is also finance minister, as well as exercising this power over the West Bank. That gives him the means to wage economic war as well as territorial war. He seized money from the Palestinian Authority, blocked funds for Palestinian worker visas. How devastating have his economic policies been for Palestinians?
It has been disastrous because he, first of all, confiscated $5.3 billion from Palestinian tax revenue, leaving the authority completely crippled, incapable of paying the salaries of its employees, incapable of paying the salaries of doctors, nurses, and incapable of buying medications for the sick people. Now we have cancer patients in Palestine without treatment because the Palestinian Authority cannot buy this treatment. I know that personally because my wife is one of them. And they have also kicked out from their jobs 250,000 workers, creating a very huge problem of unemployment. And add to that the fact that 1,300 military checkpoints in the West Bank block completely the freedom of movement, block completely the possibility of economic activity or trade. And in addition to that, 250 gates besiege many communities, transforming them into small prisons from time to time. That is very clear. And add to that the fact that Israel is strangulating Gaza with this terrible siege, where people are deprived from humanitarian assistance.
Now, this is not a man who wants resolution with Palestinians. Smotrich is very clear about that himself. He argues that West Bank Arabs have three possible responses to the current situation: accept the status of being Israel's subjects, emigrate or resist violently and be punished by Israel's military. There is no room in his ideological vision for Palestinian statehood. With a man like Smotrich in the cabinet, do you still believe resolution is possible?
Look, when he says Palestinians have to accept to be subjects of Israel, means slaves of Israel. This man represents the worst formula of apartheid. And what he actually means is that Palestinians have two options only, either to die or be ethnically cleansed. There is no other option. And when he does that, he's not doing it alone. He's doing it with Ben Gvir, he's doing it with Netanyahu. This is the official Israeli policy. Practically, since more than maybe 15 years or more, the Israeli establishment and the Zionist movement has sent only one message to Palestinians and to the world, which is that they have no place for any compromise with the Palestinians. The Oslo horrible agreement was about a possibility of a compromise. They killed it. The whole idea of two-state solution, which was sort of imposed on Palestinians, and they accepted it with great pain, because it meant that they would accept a state in only 22% of the land, while the UN gave Palestinians 44% of the land, at a time when Palestinians owned 93% of the land. Regardless of this big concession from the Palestinian side, Netanyahu and Ben Gvir and Smotrich are saying no place for any inch for Palestinians. So Israel, long time ago, has decided that there is no possibility for a compromise between them and the Palestinians. So that illusion is over. And those who still believe in that illusion are people who are trying to serve their own personal interest at the expense of the interest of their people.
Now, you mentioned Ben Gvir there, another of Netanyahu's ultra-nationalist partners. Ben Gvir has just drawn rare public criticism from Netanyahu after airing a video parading the maltreatment of international flotilla activists in Israeli detention. I'm not sure if you've seen this video. It's also caused widespread condemnation from world leaders and diplomats, including Italy, France, Canada, even the US. I wonder, were you surprised to see such a strong global reaction to Ben Gvir's latest stunt?
No, I wasn't surprised. I'm still surprised that the reaction is only condemnations and calling the Israeli ambassadors to protest. And no actual sanctions have been imposed yet. That's what surprises me. And in reality, by the way, Netanyahu did not criticize the act. He criticized the fact that Ben Gvir exposed the terrible oppression of these solidarity people publicly. And he did not before protest against the same fascist Ben Gvir, showing videos of him persecuting Palestinian prisoners. That didn't bother Netanyahu. Netanyahu was bothered only because the victims were foreign people, which could, of course, help bring the right image about what Israel is. And that's why he criticized him. But Netanyahu is a liar. And his foreign minister, Gideon Saar, is also a liar when they say they don't agree with this. Because if this had happened in any other country, this minister, Ben Gvir, will be dismissed immediately. And Netanyahu could dismiss him, but he wouldn't, because Netanyahu approves the act of calling nonviolent, peaceful people coming to help Palestinians by just trying to show how terrible the siege is on Gaza. He's calling them terrorists. He's calling them supporters of terrorists. And by which law the Israeli Navy, under Netanyahu, has the right to commit piracy by kidnapping the people in their ships in international waters. Israel has no right whatsoever to arrest anybody in international waters. So they violated the international law, They violated the laws of the sea. They violated the human rights of these people, and then they oppressed them and persecuted them, and then they took a video humiliating them and showed it to the world. In my opinion, the reaction of the world is still minimal. What the world should do is to immediately impose sanctions on this Israeli government, and the European Union in particular should stop abstaining from canceling the association agreement with Israel. This is the least they can do. And by the way, that applies to Arab countries as well, who should not have any relations with Israel when it is committing these terrible war crimes, and who should not continue to have ambassadors of Israel in their country, and who should not have any kind of normalization with Israel while it is committing genocide and other crimes against Palestinian people, and now against people from different countries in solidarity with Palestine. The main countries that really took serious decisions are Spain, Ireland, Slovenia, South Africa, Brazil, and Colombia. Maybe there are some others, but these are the main countries that took actual sanctions activities, including military embargo on Israel.
Mustafa Barghouti, thank you for your time. Bezalel Smotrich. A little bit about him. This man was born in the Israeli-annexed Golan Heights, which was and is not recognized internationally. The son of a rabbi who preached Jews' inane right to the land, his identity has been rooted in contested territory since birth. He's a self-declared fascist homophobe who has called for Torah law to govern the Israeli state and for maternity wards to be segregated between Jewish and Arab mothers. He's also a settler living in the Kajumim settlement of the occupied West Bank, which is illegal under international law. All Israeli settlements in the West Bank are illegal under international law, according to a ruling by the International Court of Justice in 2024. In 2022, Netanyahu formed the most right-wing government in Israel's history, brokering a coalition with Smotrich's religious Zionism party and Itamar Ben-Gvir's Jewish Power Party in a bid to stay in power. While they account for a minority of Netanyahu's support, they carry outsized influence, because if they quit, which they both repeatedly threaten to do, the government will fall. Smotrich has used this to extract extraordinary concessions from the deal. Netanyahu made him Israel's finance minister, already head of one of the most powerful departments, as well as a ministerial position within the Ministry of Defense. This makes him de facto governor of the occupied West Bank. Through this mandate, he oversees West Bank land management, settlement planning, and infrastructure. And as finance minister, he is free to allocate the vast resources required to put his plan into action. In other words, Smotrich holds extreme power. Here's how he uses it.
אמש דווח לי כי הוגשה נגדי על ידי התובע הפלילי של בית הדין האנטישמי בהאג בקשה לצו מעצר בינלאומי יסודי. הוצאת צווי מעצר נגד שר הביטחון ונגד שר האוצר זו הכרזת מלחמה. הרשות הפלסטינית פתחה במלחמה והיא תקבל מלחמה. אנחנו ניישב את עזה, אנחנו נכיל את הריבונות ביהודה ושומרון, כן, אנחנו נעודד הגירה של האויב החוצה מכאן, אין פתרון אחר.
בוא נתחיל אולי מהכי חשוב, הבן שלך נפצע בלבנון.
הוא יחזור לאיתנו. הוא מבקש ממני כל הזמן שלא נסיים את העבודה ונשאיר לו גם עוד מה לעשות בלבנון, וזה אני אומר לו, אל תדאג, יהיה מספיק לכולם. אנחנו עכשיו על גבול הצפון, אחרי שצה"ל נתן הנחיה לכל התושבים מהדחיה להתפנות. רציתם להביא עלינו גיהנום, הבאתם גיהנום על עצמכם. הדחיה תיראה כמו ח'אן יונס. מה זה תוכנית רב? תוכנית רב מבוססת על השמדה של חמאס.
ברור.
ואז על הוצאה של העזתים מרצועת עזה.
אתה חושב שזה...
אני חושב שזה הפתרון הריאלי.
הריבונות של ישראל מתחילה ים ונגמרת בנהר. בשלב הזה, או שבעצם אנחנו גם יוצאים את עבר הירדן, בשלב הבא?
בסדר, לאט לאט.
Smotrich's rise to power arguably marks a transformation in Israeli politics with the normalization of the settler project. Here to discuss whether he's fighting or turning the tide is Israeli journalist Meron Rapoport. Meron, welcome to MEE Live. Smotrich has mainstreamed settler politics, using his power to execute his decisive plan to annex the West Bank. But he used to be marginalized for his hardline views. He was arrested in 2005 for protesting Israel's withdrawal from Gaza. Is he still part of the fringes. How representative is his approach to Palestine of the wider Israeli population today?
Smotrich in himself is not popular. His party in the polls, and as you know, we will have election in 3 months or 4 months time. His party, the Zionist National Zionist Party, is on. Sometimes it's out, sometimes it's in. You need 3.5% in order to get to the parliament, and in most of the polls he's out, so he's not popular. I would say that in the protest, the huge protest in 2023, before the war, against the judicial overhaul, Smotrich was seen by the protesters as a villain, as a threat, as the one behind trying to overturn the Israeli democracy, according to the protesters. Of course, the vision of what is democracy is another discussion. So he's not popular in himself. But yes, I think he knows his work very well. He seems to be very consequential. He took position, as you said, in the Ministry of Defense, really the Tsar of the West Bank, and he is using it to the extreme. He nominated his own people in all sections, in the military, in what is called the civil administration in the West Bank, and in other parts of the government. He is pushing all kind of reforms that practically means de facto annexation of the West Bank. He announced the building or the intention to build more than 100 settlements during these 3.5 years in power. He's very, very consequential. I think his public appreciates him very much, but he's not popular. At the same time, he is, what happened after October 7th is that the moment that October 7th really crushed the idea that that Israel can manage the conflict. That was Netanyahu's philosophy, and even the center-left philosophy for many years, that Israel can manage the conflict. In October 7th, in the moment that the wall around Gaza fell, also it was the end of the idea of managing the conflict. At this moment, we had two options. One is to go for a negotiated deal with the Palestinian, but that unfortunately is out of the question in the Israeli narrative for more than 20 years. Not only because of Smotrich, also because of Ehud Barak and other leaders of the left. And then we were left, if there's no managing the conflict and there's no solution to the conflict, the only way is to have a total victory, as the plan that Smotrich himself published in 2018, if I'm not mistaken, portraying the way that the only solution is either a full-blown apartheid, where Palestinians accept to be second-class citizens or resident in between the river and the sea, and if they don't accept it, they have to be chased away. They have to be transferred from between the river and the sea.
Would you say that position you've just described, that post-October 7th, final victory being the only option, would you say that is a rationale that is held by a majority of Israelis then today? Is Smotrich like an agent of radicalization in Israel, or is he just a consequence of it?
I think both, but yes, I think he's an agent. He's an agent because he's a very intelligent man, and because he has a very sound politics in the sense that he knows exactly what he's doing, and he knows to connect what he's saying and what he's doing. I think, yes, his option, although he himself was not popular, although he himself is considered too messianic by many Israelis, maybe by the majority of Israelis, the option he presented after October 7th, the option of decisive victory, meaning the elimination practically of the Palestinian from this territory between the river and the sea. Yes, I think his philosophy won. He himself may be out of the Knesset, out of the parliament in 5 or 6 months, maybe he will be out of parliament. But I think he made a mark that will not be deleted for many, many years in Israel.
And it's interesting because even when you describe the prominence of that viewpoint, it is very shielded from Western audiences. Western media generally don't broadcast the most extreme statements made by ministers like Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich. We've just watched some of those, but often in English-speaking or Western, non-Hebrew channels, Israeli ambassadors deliver very censored versions that are more palatable, I suppose, with Western worldviews. I think Smotrich and Ben-Gvir often make it very difficult, however, and increasingly we've seen negative PR drawn to Israel because of their actions. I mean, not least today we're seeing the fallout of Ben-Gvir's video with the flotilla activists. Do Israelis worry about these ministers' impact on their international reputation?
Yes, this is maybe the one thing, while opposing the genocide in Gaza was, of course, a very tiny minority, and opposing the war in Iran was also quite a tiny minority, and opposing the war in Lebanon is a tiny minority. The consequences of the damage to the PR, let's say, of Israel with videos like one that those we have seen in Ben-Gvir with the flotilla, with the passenger from the flotilla. This is something that the large Israeli public does understand, that the mainstream media do criticize quite harshly, and yes, they are aware. I think Israelis live in a little bit of a strange situation, in which on the one hand they say it's only us that will decide our future. The world does not count. It's not important what the goyim, what the Gentiles will say. That's not important. That's an heritage already from Ben-Gurion's time. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, Israelis do feel part of the West. Israel do feel part of Europe. Israelis do feel that they are, let's say, the bastion of Western civilization in the Middle East. And if this Western civilization sees us in such a bad light, this is something that Israelis do not like to see themselves, not to speak, of course, of more practical consequences like silent boycott, or even a more powerful sanctions that may be on the way.
Yeah, and how about Netanyahu? I mean, in response to this Ben-Gvir incident, Netanyahu has publicly criticized the national security minister. This is actually a pretty rare move, but it hasn't gone further than that as of yet. Ben-Gvir is unlikely to face any harsher discipline. But Netanyahu is dealing with quite a significant diplomatic fallout. Does this test his patience? And if so, how far does his patience with these hardline ministers go?
I think in the last 3.5 years, the difference between Ben-Gvir and Smotrich and Netanyahu has become quite minimal. If before the war and before the last government, before this current government, still Netanyahu represented some kind of a very right wing, but still, let's say, rational or takes into account the international public opinion, the international arena. Now the difference has almost disappeared. What happened now, I think, there are two things. First, the fallout is really very harsh. And it comes, for example, just a few days after the Eurovision contest, in which Israel invested a lot of effort and maybe even a lot of money in order to whitewash its image in front of the European public. And then comes something like this that really destroys everything that Israel tried to build, as it is a liberal state that sends very nice song to this competition. And secondly, we are in time of election. The main rival of Netanyahu now is Naftali Bennett, who is very right-wing, but still tries to be a more constitutional right, let's say, moderate right, one who respect the rules, respect the Supreme Court, very right-wing, very against the Palestinian state, etc., but and with the settlements, but respect the rules. And Netanyahu maybe is afraid that some of his voters from the Likud will leave him and go to Bennett because he is still right-wing, but more, let's say, decent. And therefore, this may explain why Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar and after him Benjamin Netanyahu criticized Ben-Gvir in order to show the Israeli public, listen, we are not that extremist. We are still reasonable. We do think about the international arena. We do think about we have diplomacy, not only war, not only humiliation. And of course, same goes for Ben-Gvir. He did it also in order to show the Israeli electorate, especially the right-wing electorate, that he is the real right-wing, that you cannot trust Netanyahu, that he's soft, that he is surrendering to Trump, and I am tough. I don't care what the world say. I care only about Am Yisrael Chai, the people
Meron.
of Israel live, and that's also part of the election.
I'm going to have to wrap you there. Meron Rapoport, thank you so much for your time. Bezalel Smotrich said on Tuesday that he had ordered the eviction of a West Bank hamlet after learning about the ICC warrant arrest request. The hamlet in question is a small Bedouin village called Khan el-Ahmar, east of Jerusalem, and its population has been estimated at roughly 150 people. Right-wing Israeli leaders have long called to raze the town and expel its residents to make room for the expansion of Jewish settlements. Under Smotrich, the West Bank has become the latest battleground of Israel's genocidal campaign towards Palestinians. Expansion is sanctioned by the government and executed by settlers who act with impunity and often direct support from the occupying Israeli army. On MEE's show Oborne Unscripted, Peter Oborne travelled to Sebastia last month. Israeli settlers here, backed by the army, are expanding control over land, restricting access to farms and reshaping the town's identity. Locals describe rising violence, land seizures and a collapse in tourism alongside growing fears that their presence is being steadily erased. For many, what's happening today echoes 1948. And I'm joined now in the studio by Peter Oborne to share what he witnessed and react to the latest developments. Peter, welcome to MEE Live. You were just in the West Bank. When were you there prior to that visit, and did you notice any changes in between?
Yeah, I've been going to the West Bank now for quite a long time, many years, and quite extended trips often. Like I spent 3 months in Nablus before. October the 7th, for instance, it's a completely different place now.
Since October 7th?
No, the difference is, and I think it's important to explain this, that the big difference is not October the 7th. It's the coalition agreement between Netanyahu and the far-right religious parties, Smotrich and Ben Gvir, which was struck immediately, right at the start of 2023. Mm-hmm. And this was historic and a huge illegal deal under international law. Basically, the West Bank is occupied and recognized as such by Israel. Hence, it is governed by the military, and under international law, it should be governed in the interest of the people who are occupied. And so the military always had a duty, not that they carried it out very well, but there was, in theory, an obligation to look after the interests of the people.
Right.
Now, once it was, as part of the coalition agreement, it was handed over, taken away from the military, and given to Smotrich, and he was they created a new body, the Settlement Administration, for Smotrich to run it. And so it's now run by civilian politicians who do not have the interest at all of the Palestinians. In fact, Smotrich is only answerable, in effect, to the settlers themselves. He is a settler. He lives in a settlement, one of the most notorious, actually. And this is a completely different legal situation and moral situation.
It's interesting because you at a very surface level, you would think that rule by civilians would be softer than rule by a military occupation. But one of the people you spoke to said that settler rule was much more terrifying than soldier rule. Yeah. How did they explain that?
Well, I was on the bus from Ramallah to Nablus, which is a windy old journey these days because, it takes a bit of time to avoid all the mess, which is really the occupation.
Checkpoints.
But they were talking, the people on the bus were saying, look, it is now the settlers who rule. And the military, but at least they were predictable. The settlers are completely out of control. On this bus journey, there we are passing Messiah, where there's constant outrage. Every village, there's constant outrages. And you can see in the distance the settlements, which are violent. And they're unregulated, they can do what they want, and they run the West Bank via Smotrich. You are right that it sounds like under the old civil administration it was called, which meant that it was the civilian arm of the military. It sounded, and now it's under civilian rule. It sounds like it might be better. It's not. It's far worse. It's actually terrifying, and it's frequently now Israelis are being beaten up on the West Bank. I mean, the Israeli activists or
by settlers.
Well. I mean, and foreign journalists are getting beat. It's new, this thing. The flags are these great statements of the fact that Judea and Samaria is owned by the settlers. On Route 60. I say less than every 100 yards there's a great flag on either side of the road.
Yeah, you described these flags and posters of Rabbi, what's his name?
Schneerson.
Rabbi Schneerson, who is he was before he passed away, a symbol really of
he still
preaching.
Is.
They
believe in the Messiah, and it's part of a eschatological thing which is gripping the settlers.
You shared a piece of graffiti that accompanied one of those posters that really struck me. It said that poster was there to remind, and this is a quote, the residents of the Arab villages of their true destiny to be slaves to the children of Israel. Now, I think one of the reasons that it sort of struck me as a surprise that, this civilian rule under Smotrich is more terrifying than the military rule. One of the reasons is because when you think of the difference between civilians and military, you think about arms, an armed military and an unarmed civilian body. But this is not the situation in the West Bank, is it? The settlers you saw were heavily armed. What kind of weaponry do they have?
Well, basically machine guns. Actually, this is more and more common everywhere now, in occupied East Jerusalem. So you're seeing settlers with machine gun everywhere. And, of course, they're distributed by the security minister, the other part of the far-right element of the coalition, which is Ben Gvir, and he distributes guns. And it is worth saying that Smotrich is actually doing in the West Bank more or less what that statement about the children of Israel says. Basically, he wants to give an option to, under the Smotrich plan, which he published a few years ago, and it's still basically going strong. The option for Palestinians in the West Bank is either to emigrate, you'll be helped, they would be very happy if you was left, or you stay there without rights, no vote, but you just as servants, just as non-people.
Which is a pretty intolerable situation for most people.
And if you won't accept either of those two options, we'll kill you. You're terrorists and we'll kill you. So that's the three options. And it's being put into effect by the settlers, although I think actually they don't engage, as far as I can tell, they don't really engage. They attack the villages all the time.
And where does the Palestinian Authority come into this? Because they have 70,000 soldiers at their disposal. What are they doing to prevent lawlessness against the people, their civilians, Palestinians?
Yeah, the Palestinian Authority is a tragedy. I mean, it was set up around Oslo, and the idea was it was going to be the nascent new Palestinian state, and it was going to be fully in control of Area A, the urban places, both urban areas, both security and administratively. In practice, it is in control. It has become the kind of the arm of the military, arm of the Israelis. It works for the Israelis, and I quote a member of the Palestinian army saying this, that we do what we're told by the Israelis, and anybody who doesn't agree with that we don't is a liar.
And I suppose that view is shared by most of the residents you meet in the West
It's very
Bank.
obvious. I mean, the Palestinians in the villages, the settlers come in at night, they steal the flocks, they might kill you, they burn your house down, they blow up your car, whatever they do. There's no way the Palestinian Authority is going to send any of its 70,000
So really,
soldiers.
what can Palestinians do? How can they defend themselves and their property from just being violently taken?
It's very hard, actually. There is this feeling of steadfastness. I went to, and you meet it again and again, in Baita, which is a village I visited several times, and they got a settlement on the hill above. And they have to defend their land. They go out on marches to defend their land. So far, when I last went, there were 16 of them that had been shot dead. Not one of them had been armed. They just, some of them will throw stones and burn tires and whatnot, but they're not a threat to anyone. But 16 have been killed. Many of them just sort of minding their own business, including one Turkish-American activist.
And of course, that action is what is often used by Israeli settlers, at least internationally, to justify them being armed as well in the West Bank.
Yes, indeed. There are different strategies adopted by individual villages. For instance, in Taipei, because under Smotrich, there's this enormous expansion in these unlicensed outposts, they call them. It starts off with just a caravan on the hill, on the top of the hill. The Palestinian villages are normally, on the rise where the hills start coming out of the valleys, and then you get another caravan, and then they'll start to come down into your land, and then they'll start just coming into your village, stealing your goods, taking away your sheep, and that is the process. Now in Taipei, when I went there a few months ago, they quite clearly decided, and they said so, we decided we wouldn't resist. And so you get settlers from the neighbouring settlement wandering around on their own and stealing things and walking away because they feel invincible. They are invincible. Whereas in Burqa, which I went to, it's very moving. There's a great, in all Palestinian villages, there's this wall where there's marked the names of the martyrs. And in Burqa, they've got a tradition of resistance going back to the British. 12 died in the Arab Revolt and in the 30s. And they have a sign outside their village don't come in, stay safe. And if the settlers come in, then they will. There's a WhatsApp group or something, and they will all come out. Obviously some of them get killed, but it's interesting. This real pride. Lots of them are in Israeli jails.
Yeah.
In fact, the day I was there last, 3 of them had just been released.
And the conditions in Israeli jails, we've done quite a lot of coverage on this, are getting worse and worse. Also very likely to do with that change in government you describe when Ben Gvir has become, prisons have fallen under Ben Gvir's remit with this distribution of power, and that has led to a systematic culture of sadism
Can I get something off my chest on this?
Please.
I've noticed there's enormous row about the flotilla. All these, the British Foreign Secretary and Maloney have all woken up and condemned Ben Gvir for his disgusting behaviour. It is disgusting, but Ben Gvir has been wandering around, is in charge of these prisons, which are torturing people to death, and he's mocking prisoners. He's shown film of himself like this, only before it's been Palestinians. And I'll tell you something else. The people in the flotilla got away with it's like nothing compared to what the Palestinians are suffering in these jails. Have we had a word of protest from Tarek? Did our British Foreign Secretary care about it? No. It had to be the white Europeans getting mildly bruised by a disgusting fascist. But they never have they reacted to come to the aid of the people who are being brutalised, raped, etc.
I know.
Dying of starvation, being beaten to death in Israeli jails.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with that. I mean, none of the information is new coming out of Ben Gvir's latest video. And really, I mean, I participated in the flotilla, and I think that is what a lot of passengers felt that they were doing, was literally just using their bodies to hold their governments hostage, to force their governments to actually speak words of condemnation about even a fraction of the brutality that Palestinians reveal. And perhaps you're right, perhaps the most revealing part of all of this is that it only happens when it's white people being violated. Peter Oborne, thank you so much for joining me in the studio. It is very nice to get a guest in face-to-face. Unfortunately, that is all that we have time for on today's show.